Welcome to A Shot in the Arm podcast. It's day 3 of the World Health Assembly, May the 28th. And setting aside the gnashing of teeth and wrenching of clothes that we are coming to expect from this 77th World Health Assembly, and we're covering that in a separate podcast, we've actually got some good news. And good news it is, coming from the HIV field, because it shows, we have evidence, that if you put pharmaceutical manufacturers, multinational pharmaceutical manufacturers, with generic partners and the public sector, you can indeed make magic happen. And, you know, we have here, regardless of what some may say, a real prime example of that. Our friends at the Medicines Patent Pool, who are also supporting us with this podcast, have been working with the pharmaceutical and with generics companies, and they are celebrating 10 years of a partnership that has brought 1 billion packs, treating over 24 million adults and children with a drug called dolutegravir. Dolutegravir being part of the regimen that is used to treat people with HIV. And in the first part of this episode, we managed to catch up with the CEO of the pharmaceutical company that is behind this partnership. She's a friend of the pod. She's a fellow Pet Shop Boys fan. It's Deborah Waterhouse, CEO of ViiV. Welcome back, Deborah.
Thank you very much, Ben. Lovely to be here with you.
So, 1 billion packs, 10 years, 24 million people. It's a huge achievement, right?
We're extremely happy with really the health impact that we've been able to make over that 10-year period. When we first licensed dolutegravir in 2013, we got FDA approval, and we knew that it was such an incredible medicine that we had to live our mission, which is to leave no person living with HIV behind, and make sure that we had a strategy with partners that would ensure that there was global access to this incredible medicine, regardless of what intellectual property we held. And that's what we've done in partnership with the Medicine Patent Pool and multiple generic manufacturers. We have manufactured 1 billion packs and 24 million people who are living with HIV. That's 90% of those that are on treatment are taking dolutegravir, tenofovir and lamivudine, affectionately known as TLD.
TLD. Brilliant, brilliant. And I guess one thing that really stands out to me is that you are here in Geneva with a very, very busy schedule, and thank you for fitting us in. But you're one of the few pharmaceutical leaders that are actually here this week. Why was it important to you to be here, and be here particularly for the Medicines Patent Pool?
We've had a 10-year partnership, which has been incredibly powerful. And we want to be here side by side with our long-term partners to celebrate what we've achieved with dolutegravir, but also to look to the future. So we have a new partnership with the Medicines Patent Pool. It's on our preventative HIV injectable. And this is an injectable that prevents HIV. It's a shot every 2 months. And the first country it was approved in from a regulatory perspective with the US, but surprisingly, the next countries in which that medicine became available was Zimbabwe and Malawi and Zambia, because if you think about the profile of the epidemic, most of the 1.3 million new infections that happen today are happening in sub-Saharan Africa. And so we need to make sure that that partnership continues, not just to have broad treatment available. And as you know, U equals U, so undetectable equals untransmissible. Treatment as prevention is very powerful, but actually having options in prevention is really, really important if we're ever going to get to the end of the epidemic. So we have worked with the Medicine Patent Pool. We've now got 3 generic manufacturers that we've signed contracts with, along with the MPP, and we're working on tech transfer, which means that over time, we currently supply to the countries in sub-Saharan Africa at a not-for-profit price, but actually over time we'll have, through the generic partners, hopefully a lot more volume and lower prices, which is how these kind of mechanisms work. So it's exciting to look to the future as well as to celebrate the last 10 years.
Now, in our last podcast, we covered the challenges facing a tech transfer and a licensing arrangement with any of the long-acting injectables. But, you're first out of the gate here, and I'm sure we'll come back to that quite a bit in the next few months. But there is one thing, the other side of the coin, that I wanted to just get your thoughts on. Some have argued that doing these kind of licensing arrangements are actually not in the industry's interest, that you are spiting your nose to bite your face, as it were, that you're creating capacity and expertise with particularly generic Indian companies that they will then be able to utilize to develop markets of their own. And as you all were thinking about how to engage with the medicines patent pool, how did you square that circle?
So at the heart of any pharmaceutical company is innovation, and the reward for innovation is intellectual property. So the period of exclusivity that you're given to sell a medicine and be the only one in the market. And you can choose what you do with your intellectual property. And we believe that if we're going to live our mission to leave no person living with HIV behind, or actually to ensure access to prevention, that we had to find a way to deliver global access, but in a way that was sustainable. And so the way in which we constructed the contract is that 128 countries have access to the generic versions of our dolutegravir medicine, and that those 16 generic manufacturers from all over the world, actually, there are some Indian generics, but there are many others as well, that they would produce at volume at low prices because their factories are in different places to where ours are, but to the highest possible quality. So either pre-qualified by the WHO or approved by stringent regulatory authorities such as the FDA. So what you end up with is an opportunity for ViiV to continue to sell our medicines at a profit in the wealthier nations, Western Europe, the US, etc. We also work very hard with middle-income countries to find a solution for them. So we do very high volume, lower per unit value tenders. And then in the other 128 countries around the world, we help generic manufacturers through tech transfer to then supply those markets. So actually, it is a win-win-win always around.
I'm very glad you said that. Clearly I agree and have lived that myself with the work that I've done with the predecessor of ViiV, Glaxo Wellcome. It's just really interesting that we're needing to bring this story back now. And it sort of brings us to the broader question, I guess, of, what's going on with the pandemics treaty and the international health regulations. Are you a bit surprised that, frankly, people aren't looking at what we've achieved in HIV as a pathway forward?
So when the COVID pandemic hit, actually, there was an awful lot that was taken from the response to the HIV epidemic, and that learning was used to accelerate access in many different countries. The trouble is, things moved very fast. Not everybody was as open as they could have been to sharing. And I think we did hit some speed bumps during the COVID pandemic, which I think is why today's conversation and the conversation this week is critical, because there will be a future pandemic. It's inevitable. This is how human health evolves. And so what we need to do, and what needs to be agreed here, is the rules of the road when the next one comes. And we've learned a huge amount through what we've done in HIV. We've built on that learning with COVID, and now I believe we can go a step further. So I feel, I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful that we can find an agreement that actually does allow broad access when and if the next pandemic hits.
Yeah, certainly when, hey? And I also guess that, countries have a lot of responsibility here. It's not the private sector. We see this sort of atomization of the global order if we're not careful, into particular blocks. So again, all kudos to you. I do think the dolutegravir experience shows what you can do when you work together. Now, the Medicines Patent Pool have also produced a short film that they've premiered here in Geneva. And, you and I both at it. And I understand that you actually did a pre-screening for staff. And how did they react both to the movie, but also the 35-minute documentary? But how did they also react to seeing people in different parts of the world living their lives courtesy of a drug that they had helped develop?
So it's really interesting because most people that work at ViiV have spent their entire career working in the HIV space. And in fact, one of our longest standing employees was one of the people that discovered AZT when she first completed her PhD and decided that was what she was going to devote her life to. And she's still in our building today doing amazing work in virology. So if you think about that employee base that are so passionate about serving the patient and the shareholder, I mean, let's be completely transparent. We are a shareholder-owned company. We have to deliver kind of the profit half in order to be supported, if you like, in doing well and doing good. And so when we saw the movie, which was shown at our town hall, it was a rapturous applause. But as you can imagine, we are quite a pro-supporting global access kind of an audience. So if people hadn't been proud and delighted and happy, then I would have been extraordinarily surprised. So really, really landed well. It's a profoundly important message that's being communicated. And the key thing is that we've come a long way, but there is more still to do. And I think all of us in this field feel very strongly that there is more in terms of innovation, because this epidemic is not over yet. But we believe that we are gradually moving towards a day when actually we could see the end of the epidemic before us. And that's why conferences, assemblies such as this are so important, because you will only end this epidemic if we have a global approach to prevention, choices around prevention, and also ensuring access to medicines that allow people to suppress their virus, live their best and long and happy and thriving life, but at the same time do so in a way that means they're keeping those around them safe, because when you're undetectable, you don't transmit the virus. So I love the film. It was super exciting.
Well, I think this is a really important message for you to get out, because, there aren't a lot of business leaders here this week. And, all kudos for you coming here, putting your head a bit above the parapet in places. There will be the road to long-acting access is going to be a little bit rocky, but I think it's really important that people see the intentions. So I know you've got a really packed schedule. Let you go. Deborah, as always, you are a shot in the arm. Thanks so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Ben.
Right, well, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll be joined by colleagues from the Medicines Patent Pool and hopefully get a little bit of a clip of that wonderful film.
Nowadays, people are educated and they know this is just HIV and you can manage with it.
Meg is here from WHO. She'll tell you how much grief we gave her when they told us that women of reproductive age could not access dolutegravir. We fought, and now we are here. We are DTG sorry.
Well, welcome back. Now, that was a clip from the premiere of a short documentary that the Medicines Patent Pool produced and premiered at the Cinema Nord Sud in Geneva on the 28th of May. It was a short video about how dolutegravir has actually impacted the real lives of people. Kenya to South Africa, Nigeria, India, sort of brought quite a tear to a number of people's eyes in the audience, which was packed, by the way. So we're now joined by a representative of the Medicines Patent Pool. Yes, we were absolutely able to get someone from Medicines Patent Pool. And it's someone I've known for a good few years. He is the Director of Strategy, Policy and Advocacy at Medicines Patent Pool. It's Esteban Baroni. Welcome to A Shot in the Arm, Esteban.
Thank you very much, Ben, and real pleasure to be here with you.
You must be pretty wowed at the reception the film got last night.
Well, definitely. I mean, it was a really nice opportunity. I think in global health, we always have a sense that more needs to be done, and that there's so many problems and challenges and access gaps. But it's good from time to time to just step back and have maybe a feel-good moment, but just to reflect on the things that have been achieved, and to gain the energy we need to get in to fight the next battles and really continue on our work. But it was a really good moment with a lot of partners that played a fundamental role to that whole story.
It might be worth just getting a little bit of background on the Medicines Patent Pool, because you basically convene pharmaceutical companies like ViiV and sort of connect them with generic manufacturers and help develop licenses for those generic manufacturers to then proceed to produce high quality but very affordable versions for use in developing countries. And 24 million people on a dolutegravir regimen is a really significant achievement. Perhaps, frankly, the only good news we're going to get this week at the World Health Assembly. But Medicines Patent Pool, someone said to me that it's an organization that will never please everybody all the time and very often upsets everybody all the time. So can you tell us a bit about it?
Definitely. Well, it started off as a kind of a dream or a crazy idea, back in the early 2000s. And the idea was really quite simple at the end of the day, was saying, well, we have a huge need in low and middle income countries for the latest HIV medicines. But that's not where the real markets are. That's not where the commercial returns are. So there is an incentive for the innovators to develop new medicines. And as we've seen over the years, many new molecules being developed, new fixed dose combinations, new treatments for HIV, increasingly more effective, lower side effects, better tolerated, etc. But how do we get them to the people who need them, who are in countries that ultimately are not where the key commercial returns are, but yet where the needs are huge, and that's where the biggest burden of the disease is. And so the idea was, can we get everybody around the table, essentially, and design a collaborative mechanism that what it does is it negotiates with the pharmaceutical industry terms under which we can get more affordable, quality-assured generics available for low and middle income countries, and to accelerate that, because traditionally what we had seen is new medicines coming to market in the high income countries and then having to wait many years before they begin to be rolled out in low and middle income countries. And so you have basically two standards of care: the best possible drugs in the global north, and then in the global south, what could be afforded, which often were not necessarily the most effective drugs, or had in some cases quite a significant side effects. And so really, how can we bridge that gap? How can we reduce that delay significantly? And that's what we've been working on. And the story of dolutegravir really summarizes that in a quite incredible way, because ultimately, we're now celebrating 10 years of that agreement with ViiV Healthcare, with the pharmaceutical company that took that step to say, yes, we're gonna do this. We're gonna work with MPP and with all its partners, and that was quite a bold step back then. There were other companies that had already gone down that road. Gilead had been the first one to work with us back in 2011. But with dolutegravir being such a potential game changer, it was really great that it was possible at that point to reach an agreement. But as I was saying last night, ultimately, that license agreement is just a piece of paper. It's a very important piece of paper. But what it does is starts a lot of work. It basically committed us, committed ViiV, committed the generic manufacturers, and then subsequently a whole global health community to try and get this drug rolled out as rapidly as possible.
I think what was a surprise to a lot of people is that this partnership, wasn't just about taking the status quo and giving the technology to generics companies. You also had a research agenda attached to dolutegravir, particularly around one of the greatest unmet medical needs in HIV, treatments for pediatric populations.
Well, absolutely. I think there were two. There was the access dimension, which is the one that usually gets sort of attention. Okay, so we'll make generic versions of the innovator product and more affordably, etc. But as you say, there's also an innovation dimension, and that happened in two ways. The first one, in fact, was when generic dolutegravir actually got approved. It wasn't just generic versions of the innovator product. It was a new fixed-dose combination of tenofovir, lamivudine, dolutegravir. And that's what WHO was recommended. We need a single tablet regimen that brings together these three. And that was possible. And that was developed by the generic manufacturers that we've been working with. And then subsequently, as you said, the pediatric dimension. And we all heard so many stories of having inadequate pediatric formulations with bad taste, high ethyl alcohol content, having to break tablets or give a whole range of at times even dozens of tablets to make up a regimen. We've seen kids spitting out the drugs because they tasted badly. And really, dolutegravir has been a really interesting story. And of course, again, just like for everything else, this wasn't just an MPP story. It's a story about a lot of partners that worked together. ViiV worked, CHAI played a critical role, Unitaid funded a lot of that work, but also, and really importantly, the work of the communities, the work of the treatment programs, the mothers, the fathers, the families of the kids who are taking the drug. Every single one of those were critical to make that possible.
So what flavor is the pediatric formulation? Because again, I remember back in the early days, the formulations that were available, I think a nurse in Kenya told me that it was sick flavored, but you really spend effort on the taste. So what flavor is pediatric dolutegravir?
It's strawberry flavored. At least some of the formulations are. What's critical here, and we did at one point taste them all to make sure that this is going in. But of course, it's ultimately not what I would find palatable that matters, right? And of course, in different countries, this could mean different things. But I think what's been important about this whole story, I think, is that it was always very much being guided by the needs of the community. And that's true for the pediatric, but it's true for the adult formulation as well. There were times in which there was hesitation. We have so much data on prior drugs. Is it really worthwhile coming in with this new drug? And so there was some hesitation from the global health agencies, understandably so, while realizing the importance of really trying to make this work. And it was very much the communities that were, we need this, we want this, and let us, be in the driving seat here. And I think that's what made this possible. And what, as you said today, talking about 24 million people on dolutegravir-based regimens today.
There's something very interesting, I think, about the MPP model that doesn't get talked about. And that is, unlike many other global health agencies, you don't sing your own praises. The temptation to say we have single-handedly transformed HIV treatment globally would be impossible to neglect for some organizations who will remain nameless. But again, last night was a very interesting premiere. We had a conversation afterwards. You guys very deliberately went last and made sure that all of the partners had an opportunity to speak. And I think that really emphasized that, in a sense, this isn't about you. It is about the partners that you pull together. Can you talk a bit about the philosophy behind that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you say, Ben, this has been a massive collective effort. And yesterday's film was about putting the voices of the community, really, because that's what matters ultimately. And we had a lot of partners speaking yesterday, but there's so many who are not in the room as well, and we have to honor all of those. And so there's so many that, the whole idea behind that film was say, I am a part of the DTG story, because there were so many people at the global level, but also at the level of the small village, anywhere in the world. 128 countries is the number of countries that have already been accessed this generic dolutegravir-based regimens.
There's one other thing I wanted to ask you about that, Esteban, and that is that the temptation again might be to view this in, let's say, fairly facile donation philanthropic terms. We'll just give the technology, wash our hands, get a few big foundations to pay for it, and we're done. You had speakers from regulatory bodies, and I am going to get this right because I missed the fluffed the words last night, the Pharmacovigilance Department of Nigeria, saying how important it was to be part of this, continuing to monitoring the efficacy and safety of the drugs. And it just really struck me that what you were doing was sleeves rolled up, really the bloody hard work to deliver this.
Yes, but again, yes. I mean, it has been a lot of work, and it has been a lot of interact with a whole range of partners, and each one with their own perspective, their own interests, and that's what at times can be difficult. I mean, none of the steps in the when we tell the story 10 years later, it sounds like it was just one lovely ride downhill with everybody on board at every step of the progress of the process and fully aligned on what needs to happen. And of course, we know that's not the way it went. And there were a lot of hiccups, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned as well. But I think ultimately, when you look at the what was very clear for I think everybody that's been involved in this is where we wanted to get to, and that's pretty much where we are now. Now, could it have been done in 6 years instead of 10? Perhaps. Let's try and do that next time.
Well, you've set the precedent, and just an observation, the founding CEO of ViiV Healthcare, our very good friend Dominic Lime, said something last night in his remarks like, medicine's patent pool, they're a tough negotiator. And he said that with, I think, pride and respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, but that's what I'm talking about. I mean, we're a public health organization, so when we sit down to negotiate, we sit down to discuss with a pharmaceutical company, that's where we're coming from. That's our objective. But of course, we're talking with a pharmaceutical company that has its shareholders, that has to meet the interest of its own shareholders, and that's critical to bear that in mind. So how can we design something that works for everybody? Because otherwise, it's not going to work. But that's why it's so important. One thing that for us is very important in our own governance structures, having people from the industry, having people from the communities, having people from civil society, from governments. At every step of the process, it's not MPP staff that sits down and negotiate. It's MPP, but behind there's a whole range of different stakeholders that play a critical role in our governance, and that makes sure that we have the checks and balances to ensure that what comes out at the end of the day is something that can benefit public health, because that's what we're here for.
So Esteban, we've had a moment of good news. Great, we can reflect in that. What's next? And particularly one of the big challenges facing you and ViiV, of course, are the long-acting formulations of antiretroviral medications for prevention and treatment.
Right. And
these are game changers of a whole different order because, of course, they are anywhere between 3 to 6 monthly injections. Friend of the pod, Tommy Williams from Birmingham, Alabama, benefits from the treatment long-acting. He says it's his 3 monthly shot in the bum. But there's a lot more required in terms of technology transfer and preparation here, because this is not about making a pill anymore.
Right. And I think, generally in the HIV world, but it's true also to many of the other diseases where the global health community has been focusing on, it's primarily being about tablet formulations, small molecule drugs made through chemical synthesis, and basically pills, as you said. Now, when we look at where R&D for new HIV treatment and prevention tools is going, increasingly, that's not what it's about. Increasingly, this is about long-acting injectables. It's about implants. It's about microneedle patches. It's about monoclonal antibodies. And so that's the direction things are going. And this is what becomes really important to us to we've proven that we can do this as a community. We can do this for tablets. Now we need to make it work for more complex products, which are more complex to develop. They're more expensive to develop. They're more complex at times to administer as well. Some of these are intramuscular injections that will require a healthcare worker to administer. It's not a pill that somebody can take on its own at home. So we have to think carefully every bit of this puzzle. And I think that's the work that's ongoing right now. And of course, we have already agreements on cabotegravir long-acting with ViiV Healthcare and with 3 generic manufacturers. I'm working hard to try and bring those to the people who could benefit as rapidly as possible.
Yeah, because the rumors, of course, are that the time to manufacture for these generic companies is going to be quite a while. The other way of looking at it is, of course, around cost. And these innovations, again, they're not tablets. We know how to make pills. This is something very different. Do you think the expectation that the kind of cost price that dolutegravir-based regimens, pill-based regimens, and what was it? It was a bit last night, like an inverse auction. We were down from $50 to $40 per regimen per year for one person. How realistic is it for expectations that these new innovations, long-acting, can be at the same kind of cost?
I think the reality is we don't know yet. There is certainly a lot of investment that's been required from the manufacturers, and are they going to be de-risked in that process? Is first question. And second question is what the market is going to look like for PrEP. PrEP is being taken off over the last couple of years, but until then, the uptake had been very low in a lot of countries.
PrEP being the prevention pre-exposure prophylaxis.
Right, that's right. Yeah, pre-exposure prophylaxis, and cabotegravir long-acting. Initially, it's going to be rolled out for PrEP in low and middle income countries, and if the volumes remain very low, the price will never come down as much as we would want. So these are things that need to need a lot of thinking, a lot of working together with the funders, with the procurement entities, with all those who become involved in market shaping. Because if we get a lot of people on these treatments, we could see economies of scale and significant price reductions. How low can it become? That's an open question. We don't actually know that yet.
There's also an argument that you are actually very much shaping the market and playing a role in driving competition. And at very general terms, and I apologize if this is too simplistic, ViiV's research agenda for cabotegravir long-acting, looking at trying to make it 6 monthly or even annually, and I don't know how far or how viable the research there is. And they're doing that because, of course, they see in the rearview mirror the long-acting coming through from Gilead that offers similar, very good, infrequent dosing. And I guess, are you worried that generic manufacturers might put a lot of effort into preparing for one particular form of long-acting when, in fact, the one that may or may not have a significant access size might be a completely different formulation?
Well, that worry will always be there, partly because we've seen many times the game changer coming down the pipeline, and then the final results of the clinical trials come out. It turns out it's not a game changer. There's some side effect or some something discovered during the clinical trials that proved that was no longer going to be the drug that was expected. So in many respects, I think we have to be smart about all of this. And if we want the generic manufacturers to continue to invest in developing the next generation of treatments, we've got to work with them and we've got to support them, and also mindful of the fact that none of us really knows which one will take off. We don't know how people, and not patients in this case, these are people who actually are HIV negative, who are going to be taking this prevention injection. Will they take it? Is this the right one for them? And none of us can know that until all the implementation studies have been done, and we start getting the real results from the ground, which is very different from what we see in a clinical trial context. And so I think that's why it's so important for us to not just sit back and hope for the best, but really work very closely with all these partners, including the generic manufacturers along this journey.
Well, talking about partnership, we of course at A Shot in the Arm have a partnership with Medicines Patent Pool to tell these stories over the course of the year. So I'm really looking forward to us being able to expand upon the lessons learned and the next steps for the Medicines Patent Pool. Esteban, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure, Ben. Thank you so much for your work as well. Really important.
Well, that's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, subscribe and give us 5 stars. We will be back with more episodes from the World Health Assembly. And in the meantime, have a great day and a safe day, everyone.